Hello fellow YouTubers, this is Anthony with Home Guitar Mods, and this week's Tone of the Week we're going to be going over the 4-cable method. I'm going to show you how you can use your PodHD unit into any amplifier with an effects loop in order to get the great tones of your amp, but the great effects on the PodHD, and marry them together to help you in your live or recording rig. So let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. First off, you'll need a PodHD unit of some type. Here, as you can see, have the PodHD500. You'll also need 3 cables. Now I realize this is called the 4-cable method, but really the 4th cable is just your guitar going into the pod. Now we're going to start with is inserting your guitar instrument cable into the guitar input, right here. What we'll then need to do is run a cable out of the PodHD 500's effects send into the head of your amplifier. So now as you see, we have one instrument cable coming out of the back of the pod's effects loop. That's out of the send. Now that cable then runs up into the input on the front of your amplifier where you would normally plug in your guitar. In the editor screen of your PodHD 500, which is kind of hard to see, you'll need to insert an effects loop. Now as one of the effects, you can scroll through and you'll find effects loop. Now mine, as you can see, is towards the beginning of my pedals here. Now anything before this, such as my volume, noise gate, and overdrive pedal, the signal will come from your guitar input through the effects loop and then get sent out the effects send and into the front of the amplifier. Now that your signal has gone through the pod, through your first effects and out the effects loop and then the instrument input, your signal will run through the preamp section of your amps so you can get that great tube tone of your amp. Now that signal will then be sent out the effects send in the back of your amplifier. Out of the effects send of the amplifier, you need to run a cable from the back of your amp into the effects return on the PodHD 500 or whatever PodHD you have. Alright, so now a signal comes out of the effects send on the amplifier. We then run that cable to the effects input on our PodHD 500. So now that signal will go where you see here we have our effects loop, and that signal will then pass through any effects afterwards and then out your guitar output. And from that cable we'll want to run into the back of the amp, and we will plug that cable into the effects return on the rear of the amplifier, where the signal will then run through the power tubes and then out your speakers. Alright, so that's how you use the 4-cable method on your PodHD. Now you want to experiment with levels. I found the PodHD is slightly hot, so my signal is actually louder. Now within that effects loop you can adjust the parameters of the input and output, but I found what was actually easiest to do, what was really helpful, was to run through and switch between amp and line on the output, as well as the effects send return has a switch for line and I think a pedal option. Now what you'll find is you might actually have more noise with one switch flipped another way. So you want to experiment with that and experiment with the volume on your amp. A quick tip and trick you can do to adjust volumes is after you have everything set up, play like you would, get your amp volume set where you think you want to be, and then walk to the back of the amplifier and unplug the effects return. So that would be the cable running from the pod into the back of the amplifier. Now if you unplug that, it'll actually get rid of the PodHD and your signal will simply be running into the front end of the pod through your pedals and then out the effects loop into the front of the amp. This will allow you to make sure that the levels aren't too high or too cold. I find that with my setup, I actually have to take my master volume and kick it over just one line, just one little turn. But that one little turn made a ton of difference in volume. Anyway, experiment. If you want, you can go and download my patch. There'll be a link down below showing you where you can find the patch that I've been using as of late. But again, you can throw any pedal, any combination. It lets you use your tube amps, your cabinets to get awesome tones, but use the wide array of effects that are available on the PodHD 500. This is Anthony with Home Guitar Mods, and thanks for watching. Blah blah blah, that's way too much talking. On the week, blah 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 blah. Just blah. blah 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 blah. Sounded good. I'm gonna go with that.